went to high school here in New Hampshire. How many of you knew that? Wow. I went to Phillips Exeter Academy, graduated in 1992. And they had me back a few months ago, and I was honest, I said, I haven't been back since I graduated because I did not enjoy myself here. And then the student body erupted in applause. I was like, whoa, that's not the reaction I was going for. And I wasn't felt about the administration. So I grew up in upstate New York. I went to high school here in New Hampshire. Afterwards, I went to Brown University, not that far from here in Rhode Island. Didn't know what to do afterwards, so I went to law school. Spent 5 unhappy months as a lawyer. Then left to start a business that turns out did not work out, an ill-fated business. How many of you have started a business or organization or a club or even mailing list? And raise your hand. So if you have your hand up, you know that 1, it's a lot harder than you thought it was going to be. And 2, when someone asks you how it's going, what do you have to say? Great. It's great. Turns out it's great until it doesn't work out. You're like, oh, it turns out. My company did not work out. My parents still told people I was a lawyer for a while. They were like, oh, he's doing great. So my business flopped, but I'd been bitten by the bug. I found trying to start a company was invigorating and genuine, and so I stuck with it. I joined a series of growth companies as an early employee, learning from more experienced entrepreneurs, and then I became the head of an education company that grew to become number 1 in the United States and was bought by a bigger company in 2009. Now, in 2009, 10 years ago, the country was still coming out of the financial crisis. How was that for you all in your communities here in New Hampshire? It was rough, right? I mean, it was rough in most of the country. And I thought I had some insight as to why that had happened. That the wannabe whiz kids from Exeter and Brown and Columbia had all gone to Wall Street and devised these financial instruments that had crashed the economy. And so I thought, well, that's a train wreck. That's a disaster. What can we do about that? So I quit my job and started this organization called Venture for America that trained young entrepreneurs to create businesses and jobs in Detroit, Cleveland, Birmingham, New Orleans, and other cities around the country. How many of you grew up here in New Hampshire? Seems like probably a majority. Elsewhere in New England? Mid-Atlantic, like me, sort of like the New York, Pennsylvania crew. Midwest, anyone? Yeah, you. South? Woo! West Coast? So when I started Venture for America, I donated some money to start the org, because that's what you do sometimes. And then I started calling rich friends with this question: do you love America? And the smart among them said, what does it mean if I say yes? And I said, at least $10,000. And then 12 of them said, I love America for $10,000. I was like, I thought you did. So we had a few $100,000 to start, and then it grew. We recruited incredible young people that I'm proud to have worked with, helped create several thousand jobs around the country over the next 7 years. That's what got me recognized by the Obama administration. I got to bring my wife to meet the president. So my in-laws were very excited about me for about a week. Yeah, nice job. But during this time, during these 7 years, I started to have this sinking feeling, this sense of unease. Because when I traveled throughout the Midwest and the South, I was staggered by the disparities between regions. Where if you fly between St. Louis and San Francisco, or Michigan and Manhattan, you feel like you're crossing through dimensions or decades or ways of life and not just hopping a few time zones. And I felt like I was pouring water into a bathtub that had a giant hole ripped in the bottom. Where for every job my entrepreneur organization was creating, we were losing tens or hundreds of jobs because of bigger changes in the economy. But I was still surprised when Donald Trump became our president in 2016. How did you all react when that happened in 2016, that November night? So there were some tears, shock, disbelief. Some of you, and you know this, many of your neighbors celebrated. Like that, this was a massive victory for many Americans. To me, it was a giant red flag that tens of millions of our fellow Americans felt like it was the right thing to do to take a gamble on the narcissist reality TV star as president. Because I don't think there were many illusions as to who Donald Trump was or is, but they felt like this was still a better path forward. And so, for me, that was a giant stop sign where I said, okay, I have to examine what the heck I've been doing, and what the real problems are that got Donald Trump elected. If you turn on cable news today, why would you think Donald Trump is our president? Russia, Cambridge Analytica. You watch the Netflix documentary? Yeah, that's a good topic. Catchphrase in the name calling, Twitter, Hillary Clinton, discontent, emails, Facebook, FBI, sort of all mixed together in a cocktail, right? Like a really gross cocktail. So it's like the cocktail of reasons that's been presented to us as to why Donald Trump is our president. But I went through the numbers and found what I believe is the most clear and direct and powerful explanation, which is that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Iowa. And if that list of states sounds familiar, those are the states that Donald Trump needed to win, and did win. And now we are doing the same thing to millions of retail jobs, call center jobs, fast food jobs, truck driving jobs, and on through the economy. How many of you have noticed stores closing where you live here in New Hampshire? And why are they around? I mean, everyone's hands are up. Why are those stores closing? Amazon. $20 billion in business getting sucked up by Amazon every year. It's closing 30% of American stores and malls. How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year? Zero. That is your math, New Hampshire. 20 billion out, zero back. 30% of your stores and malls closed for good. And one of the most common jobs in your state is being a retail cashier. The average retail worker is a 39-year-old woman making between $9 and $11 an hour. When her store closes, what is her next move? When you all call a big company and get the customer service software, the bot, you probably do the same thing I do, which is you pound 000, say human, right? That's on the line as fast as possible, right? How do you do that? Raise your hand. Yeah, that's all of us. That software is terrible. But in 2 or 3 years, the software is going to sound like this. Hey, Andrew, how's it going? What can I do for you? It'll be seamless, efficient, delightful, a little bit seductive, apparently. Optimized for me. Wow, you make me feel a little warm. But it's going to be so efficient that you might not even realize it's software. That's how good it's going to be. It's not true artificial intelligence, but it's going to be software that's sophisticated enough to detect changes in your tone of voice and can map to millions of different interactions. So here's a trick for the AI. Just act like you're angry, and then they'll probably be more responsive and they'll probably give you free stuff. Anyway, what is this going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who answer a phone for a living right now and make $14 an hour? I just spoke to 70 CEOs in New York City. I asked them, I was like, how many of you are looking at replacing your back office clerical workers with software and artificial intelligence? Guess how many hands went up out of 70? All 70. And we knew all 70 hands were going to go up because you could actually fire those CEOs if they did not replace those workers with that software. Because they have to optimize for the bottom line, one variable. And if you say, I can replace hundreds of your call center workers with software, and there's a licensing fee, and it's a lot less than those salaries, then you have to do that deal. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about truck driving because to me it's one of the most disastrous scenarios that's unfolding before our eyes right now. How many of you all know a truck driver here in New Hampshire? It's the most common job in 29 states, 3.5 million truckers. The average truck driver is a 49-year-old man, making about $50,000 a year, spending days away from his family. 94% men, so I'm not like stereotyping. It's like, oh, like he's acting like all truckers are men. It's like, yeah, most of them are men. And right now, they're doing their jobs. In many cases, their health is starting to have some issues. My friends in California are working on trucks that can drive themselves. And they're working on those self-driving trucks because the cost savings to automating truck driving are estimated to be $168 billion a year. Think about that number for a second. That's a lot of money. That's enough money to employ hundreds of the smartest engineers in our country to solve the set of problems around self-driving trucks. I literally have friends working for these companies, and they tell me they're 98% of the way there. Now that sounds like a lot, but a 2% error rate is very high when you're talking about trucks. You just have like semis like stashing into things, and you're like, uh-oh, that's another error rate. And the self-driving trucks are really terrible with something called snow. Because if the road markings aren't clear, then the computer's not sure what to do. That's one reason why they're testing these trucks in Arizona. So how are they going to get the last 2%? They believe that with 5G, they can equip the trucks with teleoperating software. So think about this 6 years from now, we have 5G everywhere. You have a truck driving through New England, weather's bad, computer's not sure what to do. So then it beeps, and there's a teleoperator in Nevada, in a warehouse, who then is notified, hey, you need to drive this truck. He then beams into the truck and drives it like a video game, because there are cameras in the front of the truck, so we can just look out the front. So he's just driving it from Nevada. And then when the computer beeps and says, I've got it again, then he beams back out. What is the ratio going to be between teleoperators and the 3.5 million Americans who drive a truck for a living right now? 1 to 20? 1 to 30? What's that going to mean for the 3.5 million truckers or the 7 million Americans who work at truck stops, hotels, diners, and retail establishments that rely on the truckers getting out and having a meal every single day? We're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution. Have you ever heard a politician say the words fourth industrial revolution? Just now. And I'm barely a politician, as you probably noticed. So these are the problems that got Donald Trump elected. The Democrats are acting like Donald Trump is the cause of all of our problems. He is not. He is a symptom. He's a manifestation of the fact that our economy is evolving in fundamental ways and more Americans are getting pushed aside. And those changes are only accelerating while he's in office. So these are the explanations that I found in the numbers. And if you doubt this explanation, there's a straight line up between the adoption of industrial robots in a voting area and the movement to Trump. It's the strongest correlation anyone can find. If you graph it, just goes straight up to the right. So my first move when I unpacked all of this was not to run for president, because I'm a fairly lucid person, fairly sane. So my first move was to go to DC, lay out the facts to some of our leaders and say, hey, it's not immigrants that are causing these problems, it's automation and an evolving economy. And we need to wake America up to the fact that we're scapegoating people have nothing to do with it, scapegoating causes nothing to do with it, our media is not helping, and here are the true problems. What are we going to do about it? And what do you think the folks in Washington, D.C. said to me when I asked, what are we going to do about it?
You can't talk about it.
Yeah, number one is can't talk about that. Number two, we should study that. Number three, we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. And that sounds very responsible. But I looked at them and I said, sounds great. I looked at the studies. You all want to guess how effective the federally funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers in the Midwest who lost their jobs?
0 to 15%.
0 to 15%. That's right. He's yang yang. That's right. 0 to 15%. That's a fail by any standard. And when I said to the folks in D.C., hey, we're terrible at retraining, by the numbers, according to all these independent studies, you know what the response was? I guess we'll get better at it. And someone in D.C. said something that led me to you all here in New Hampshire today. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one here in D.C. will do anything about this set of problems because this is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. And the only way we will do something about it is if you create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I said, challenge accepted. I'll be back in a little while, and that's why I'm here running for president. That sounds like a movie supervillain speech, doesn't it? But as a DC lobbyist, it turns out they're kind of the same. So I've been running for president a little while now, and as I'm here with you today, I'm fourth in some national polls. It's amazing the growth that we've had in this campaign because Americans are very smart, and Americans recognize the truth when they hear it. So the question is, what are we going to do with this set of problems? If the recipes out of DC's not going to help us, we're going to have to do this ourselves. And when I say we, I really mean you, because you are the voters of New Hampshire. Turns out you're some of the most powerful people in Western civilization. It doesn't feel like that. You're just living your lives being like, hey, it turns out you all are the most powerful people in Western civilization. I'll break down the math for you. It's fun. You know how many Californians each of you is worth? 1,000. There are about 200 people in this room today. That's like 5 football stadiums full of Californians here in this room. This room is actually the ideal room to launch a revolution from. This is the hub of the revolution. It may not feel like it, but again, each of you is worth your weight in gold. I've done the math. It does not take that many of you to take a new vision to the rest of the country and have it spread like wildfire. This is not just an opportunity, this is a responsibility, honestly, because if you guys don't do this thing, then we have another 4 years of watching our way of life deteriorate. So the question is, what is the vision? When you first heard about me in the campaign, you heard something like this. There's an Asian man running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. Remember that? Remember the first time you heard that? Nothing like the first time, am I right, New Hampshire? And the first time you heard it, it sounded like a gimmick. It's like, haha, like that will never happen. But this is not my idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of the country. He called it the citizen's dividend. Martin Luther King fought for this in the 60s. He called it the guaranteed minimum income for all Americans. And it is what he was fighting for the day he was assassinated in 1968. 1,000 economists endorsed it, and it was so mainstream that it passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon, the Family Assistance Plan. Came this close. And then 11 years later, it actually did pass in one state where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? Alaska. And how does Alaska pay for it? Oil. And what is the oil of the 21st century? Technology, software, data, self-driving cars and trucks. A study just came out, if you saw The Great Hack on Netflix, you remember this. A study just came out that said our data is now worth more than oil. Do you see that? Do you all remember getting your data check in the mail? I don't. Where did the data check go? I'll tell you. It went to Facebook, Amazon, Google, Netflix, and the rest of the gang, who again are paying 0 or near 0 in taxes. So this is the true nature of the 21st century economy, that this data dividend that we should all be getting instead is getting scurried off into the cloud to multinational tech companies that will pay 0 back into the system. So after I'm president, thanks to you all, thank you New Hampshire, after I'm president we passed the freedom dividend. How would you spend $1,000 a month in real life after it starts getting deposited into your account? Tuition, healthcare, food, was that cleaning savings, cleaning, housing? How much of it would stay right here in New Hampshire? The vast majority of it. A little bit of it would float up to the cloud. You would upgrade your Netflix subscription and get like an extra Amazon goodie. But most of it would stay right here in New Hampshire. It would go to car repairs you've been putting off, and daycare expenses, and Little League signups, and nonprofits, and arts organizations. This is the trickle-up economy. From our people, our families, and our communities up. It's particularly powerful for rural areas that are getting depleted systematically in this economy. Creates a genuine path forward and also gives our children a chance to live the kind of life that they want in an environment of their choosing, instead of feeling like they have to go to certain places to access certain types of opportunities. The trickle-up economy would work, unlike the trickle-down economy, which we all know is garbage. Even Republicans knew it was garbage. They're just really good at naming stuff. So I think the trickle-down economy was a pretty offensive name if you reflect on it for a moment. It's like, what? So something's supposed to trickle down on me? What? So this is the trickle-up economy from ourselves up. And the $1,000 a month, it's not everything but the money. I've been giving the Freedom Dividend personally to several families around the country. And when I saw one of the recipients, Colin Christensen, who's taking care of his mom who's recovering from cancer, he was beaming when he saw me, and he said he spent some of the money on a guitar and was playing shows for the first time in years. And that's how he spent the money. Here in New Hampshire, Jody Fassey used the money to repair her car, went from like a crisis to an inconvenience. And Mallory Shannon spent it on going back to school. But in every case, it makes us stronger, healthier, mentally healthier, less stressed out. more productive, more optimistic. How many of you would agree with this statement? Americans feel less reasonable, less rational, less optimistic, and more susceptible to bad ideas than they did 10 years ago. How many would agree with that? And the reason why you have that feeling is that if you can't pay your bills, studies have shown that you have a mindset of scarcity that functionally decreases your IQ by 13 points, or one standard deviation. So, and I want you to think about yourself in this situation, because we've all been there in different ways, where if you're stressed out about paying next month's bills, and then someone comes to you talking about like bigger issues, it's like, I can't think about that right now. I gotta like think about right now. So if you put the majority of Americans in that situation, which we are in right now, because 78% of us are living paycheck to paycheck, and almost half of us can't afford an unexpected $400 bill, then we start becoming more inward and subject to negativity and pessimism. The freedom dividend would actually reverse the mindset of scarcity that is tearing us apart and making us turn on each other. It's also making it much easier to scapegoat immigrants for, again, problems that immigrants have nothing to do with. Because if you feel like your kid's future is insecure and then someone comes on your TV and says they're to blame, and you're like, well, I guess that's the only story I'm being told, so I guess I'll go that direction. So this is the freedom dividend. This is a way we can actually start moving our society in a positive direction to be able to address the big challenges like climate change. But it's not just about the money in our hands, about what the money would mean. And then it's about solving the real problems of this time. So what do I mean by that? How many of you were excited about GDP when you woke up this morning? You're like, I hope I make a big contribution today. It sounds ridiculous. But GDP is the way we measure our societal progress at this point. And I talk about my wife who's at home with our two boys, one of whom is autistic. How much does her work count in GDP every day? Zero. Nothing. And we know that's nonsense. We know that the work she's doing is among the most important and challenging. And it's super hard. I was home with the boys for a couple of days, and you know what I said after a couple of days? Get me back to doing something easier, like running for president. And if you're a parent, you know what I'm talking about. It's really challenging. And so if GDP is leading us in the wrong direction, and to give you some parameters on this, GDP is at a record high. Also at record highs right now in America: stress, financial insecurity, drug overdoses, suicides. Our life expectancy has declined for 3 years in a row. Do you know the last time American life expectancy declined 3 years in a row? The Spanish flu of 1918. Global pandemic killed millions 100 years ago. You have to go back a century to find a time when American life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row. And we are back in Spanish flu territory now because suicides and drug overdoses have each overtaken vehicle deaths for the first time in American history. These are the reasons why Donald Trump is our president. And we have the wrong measurements. Even the inventor of GDP said this is a terrible measurement for national well-being, and we should never use it as that. And here we are 100 years later being like GDP, like falling off a cliff. It really makes no sense on the face of it. So as your president, what I will do is suggest to you all first, if GDP is kind of a dud, what would actually make you happy if I said this got better in your community? Health and life expectancy. It's like we're living longer. It's like, yeah, that's cause for celebration. What else?
Clean water.
Clean air and clean water. If I say your environment got better, you'd be really excited about that. How about mental health and freedom from substance abuse? If I say we're actually getting happier and stronger where it counts. How about childhood success rates? We have measurements for all of these things, and as your president, it will be my pleasure to go down the street to the Bureau of Economic Analysis and say, hey, GDP is 100 years old, kind of dumb and out of date at this point. We're going to modernize it and include these other measurements and form the American scorecard. I don't need Congress to do this. This is just my Bureau of Economic Analysis. I can be like, hey guys, we're going to get with the program. And then I will report to you all, the American people, every year at the State of the Union, how we're doing in a PowerPoint deck. I'm going to be the first president to use a PowerPoint. So this is a vision of our economy that we have to take to the rest of America as soon as possible, one that actually addresses the realities of the 21st century. The truth is right now, as a society, we're very confused because we have been taught to equate economic value and human value and say they're the same things. And that if you have no economic value, then you're worthless. That's why you wind up with bizarre contortions, like saying we're going to retrain the truck drivers to become coders, or something like that, when that really makes no sense. And if you go with me to a truck stop, you'll know what I'm talking about. I mean, like, if you try and say, hey, would you like to be retrained? They'd be more likely to punch you in the face than be like, yeah, sign me up. No. So we have to be honest about where we are and start defining an economy in a way that will work for us. We are the masters, owners, and shareholders of this country. It does not feel like it. It feels like you're subject to this giant machine that you're just plugging into, and then you need to remain efficient. And if you stop running at any moment, then we will throw you aside. That is the way America feels right now. It also feels to most of us that our government is not ours anymore. That you have these giant pipes clogged full of money, millions and millions of dollars. And most Americans have given up. They think that their vote does not matter. For the most part, they are correct. But for you all, you're like the superpowered Americans, where if you decide to vote in a particular direction, you can flush the pipes out. It's unbelievable. That's why I love being here so much. This place is like the magic of democracy, in a way that the framers and founders actually intended, and in a way that's been lost in just about the entire rest of the country. So that is why I'm here with you all. How many of you have seen, let's say, just hold up a hand and show us how many presidential candidates have you seen in the cycle so far? So this would be 5, this would be 2, 3 now, that's fine. 10, that's what I'm talking about. 10. So this is a sign of the power and privilege you have. You're a little spoiled by it. You're a little bit like, don't know about that Yang fellow, only met him the one time. But the reason why we're all here is because of the power you possess. And we need you to use that power to the advancement of our society as quickly as possible. When Donald Trump came up in 2016, he said, we're going to make America great again. And what was Hillary Clinton's response? America's already great. Remember that? And that did not win. We need to acknowledge the depth and severity and nature of the problems, but also have genuine solutions. What were Donald Trump's solutions? We're going to build a wall, we're going to turn the clock back, we're going to bring the old jobs back. Turns out we have to do the opposite of those things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society as quickly as possible. And we need to evolve in the way we think about ourselves, our role in society, and our work and value. And I am the ideal candidate for that job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you.